The Ghillie Dubh of Loch An Draing. Once upon a time, a young family lived in the birch woods near Loch An Draing, near Gairloch in the Highlands of Scotland. The father worked for the Laird Mackenzie, while the mother kept home and cared for their young daughter Jessie. From the very start, Jessie was an independent girl, and she learned to walk at a very young age. One fine summer's day, when her mother was occupied with housework, young Jessie toddled out to the woods all alone. Now this is way back when there were all kinds of beasties lurking in the woods, both natural and supernatural, and this included things like wolves. Little Jessie had not yet learned that the woods could hold dangers as well as pretty things, and she loved to hear the birds singing. So she followed their singing, toddling on her little legs deeper and deeper into the woods, until the light of day began to fade. At this point the sounds of the forest changed. Gone was the melodious bird song of the day and early evening. Now it was the turn of the eerie rustling of the nocturnal creatures and the spooky hoot hoot of the owls. Jessie tried to find her way back home, but in the increasing dark she soon became lost and very, very scared. She quickly wore herself out, going this way and that, and seeking a path out of the woods. It didn't work. She sat down at the base of a particularly large birch tree and cried until she almost cried herself to sleep. Then Jessie heard big, heavy footsteps in the forest that got closer and closer to her, until a large shadow obscured even the vague moonlight that filtered down through the trees. Jessie was scooped up into big, leafy arms and carried away deeper into the woods, to a shelter made of birch branches, where she safely spent the night. As dawn rose the next day, Jessie found herself in the company of the Ghillie Dubh. A Ghillie Dubh, as the name implies, is a dark-haired solitary male fairy who's quite youthful in appearance. The Ghillie Dubh is a wild yet gentle soul who loves nature he lives in and who dresses in leaves and moss, and he has a soft spot for children, to whom he is very kind. As a kindly soul, the Ghillie Dubh escorted Jessie safely back to the boundary of her home and waved her goodbye. Her parents were thrilled to see her because they'd been frantic when they realised she'd gone. The years passed. The birches of the wood lost their leaves for the winter, grew them back for the summer, and lost them again, over and over. Jessie grew up. Her parents died, but she continued to live in the house in the birch woods. In time, Jessie got married and became pregnant. One fine evening, just as dusk was settling, Jessie was taking in the washing that had been hung out to dry for the day when she heard very noisy people coming up the path towards her home. Her husband was away working, and he was not by nature a noisy man, so she knew it wasn't him. So she became a little worried. Soon enough, a party of men with guns over their shoulders arrived at her gate. She knew them on sight to be the Laird Mackenzie and some of his no-good friends. Earlier in the day, the men had been drinking and boasting, and the matter of the Ghillie Dubh had come up in their drunken conversation. And because they were trophy-hunting idiots, they had decided there and then that they would hunt the Ghillie Dubh, chop off his head and hang it in the Laird's castle. These men were still somewhat worse for wear and were looking for somewhere to rest up on the way to their hunt. They barged their way into Jessie's home, demanding food and drink and putting their muddy boots on the table. How rude and uncouth these men were. Jessie recalled how the Ghillie Dubh had assisted her as a lost and frightened child, and how the gentle soul had been far more of a real gentleman than the Laird and his aristocratic friends. So she formed and put into action a very cunning plan. She presented the already quite drunk men with a bottle of her best special brew, the really potent stuff that was usually reserved for health reasons, such as when you need the kind of proof level that will knock you straight out when you get a bad cold. Within mere minutes the men were sleeping soundly where they sat. Jessie quietly headed out of her home and whispered into the dark woods, for night had truly come by this time, and called out, "Ghillie Dubh, Ghillie Dubh, Ghillie Dubh," and waited. A few moments later she heard the rustling of leaves, the cracking of twigs, and the distinctive large footfalls of the Ghillie Dubh. Taking his hand as gently as he had taken hers all those years ago, she told the Ghillie Dubh that now it was the time for her to repay him for his kindness. Jessie told the Ghillie Dubh what the men had planned and led the Ghillie Dubh into the barn next to the house and bade him to lie down and make himself comfortable in the hay and not to move until she told him that it was safe to do so. The Ghillie Dubh obeyed, while Jessie went back into her house and went to bed, leaving the men snoring their heads off at her dining table. Next morning the men went off on their hunt without even thanking Jessie for her hospitality. Of course the Ghillie Dubh was nowhere to be found, so the men were soon disappointed as well as hungover. Later in the day Jessie overheard the men as they passed her house on their way home, moaning about what a bad and pointless day it had been. After she heard their voices disappear into the distance, Jessie went into the barn and told the Ghillie Dubh that he could now return to his home in the birchwoods, but that she couldn't guarantee that the horrible men might not come back one day. She bid him to take very good care of himself and to carefully watch out for such unpleasant people in future. Without looking back, the Ghillie Dubh headed deep into the woods, and local legend says that that was the last time that any adult human ever saw him, although children with kind hearts are still said to see him in the woods from time to time. The end. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.